I sat down with a couple a while back who were both in their early 60s, getting ready to retire in a few years. They'd worked their whole lives, both had decent jobs, combined income that peaked around 115,000. Nothing spectacular, but solid middle class. When we started talking about their retirement readiness, they were confused and frustrated. They'd earned close to $3.5 million over their combined careers. And somehow they only had 230,000 saved. No major catastrophes had wiped them out. No medical bankruptcies, no failed business ventures, no devastating market crashes that they got caught in. They just couldn't understand where all that money had gone. So we spent an afternoon reconstructing their financial history, going through old records, old bank statements, trying to piece together the puzzle. What we found wasn't one big mistake. It was 5 specific everyday spending habits repeated thousands of times over 40 years that had quietly consumed what should have been a comfortable retirement nest egg. Habits that felt completely normal, that all their friends were doing, that seemed harmless at the time. Let me walk through those 5 habits, because if you recognize yourself in them, you're probably destroying your own retirement the same way this couple did. Habit 1 is what I call automated lifestyle expansion. Every time income goes up, spending automatically rises to match it, without any conscious decision being made. This couple started their careers in the 1980s, making a combined $42,000. They learned to live on that. It was tight. They had a small apartment, drove old cars, cooked at home most nights, didn't have much left over for extras, but they made it work. Then over the years, raises happened, promotions came, their income grew to 60, then 80, then eventually peaked at 115,000. And at every step, their spending expanded to consume the entire income increase. They didn't sit down and decide to increase their standard of living. It just happened gradually, almost invisibly. Better apartment became better house. The mortgage went from $800 a month to $2,000 a month because they could afford a nicer neighborhood. Basic car became nicer car, became luxury car. Car payments went from $300 combined to $800 combined. Occasional dinners out became regular dinners out, became expensive dinners out several times a week. Restaurant spending went from maybe $100 a month to $600 a month. Basic cable became premium cable, became streaming services plus premium cable. Entertainment spending crept from $50 a month to $200 a month. One vacation a year became 2 or 3 nicer vacations. Vacation spending went from $2,000 annually to $8,000 annually. Their kids' activities went from local sports to travel teams and expensive camps. Kids' activities went from $1,000 a year to $5,000 a year. Each expansion felt justified at the time. We're earning more, we deserve to enjoy it. We work hard, we should be comfortable. Everyone at our income level lives this way. The kids deserve opportunities. These are all reasonable thoughts, but collectively those justifications meant they saved almost nothing despite decades of income growth. When we calculated it out, if they just kept their lifestyle at roughly the 70,000 level once they reached it in their mid-30s, everything above that could have been saved. For the last 25 years of their career, that would have meant saving about $35,000 to $45,000 annually. Even being conservative with investment returns, that disciplined approach would have given them over $2 million at retirement instead of $230,000. Instead, at every income level, from $42,000 to $115,000, they were saving roughly the same percentage, about 8%. So as income rose, savings rose proportionally, but never captured the full increase. The lifestyle consumed everything. The habit that destroyed their retirement wasn't spending too much at any particular income level. It was letting spending automatically expand with every raise so that they never captured any of their income growth as savings. They worked for 40 years, their income nearly tripled, and they ended up in the same financial position at the end as if they just earned $42,000 the whole time. I knew someone who broke this habit deliberately in his early 30s, and it completely changed his trajectory. Every time he got a raise, he immediately increased his retirement contribution by at least half the raise amount, often more. His lifestyle improved slightly with each raise, but the majority went to savings. He started at $48,000, was contributing 6%, about $2,900 annually. Got a raise to $53,000, increased contributions to 10%, about $5,300 annually. Another raise to $60,000, bumped to 14%, 8,400 annually. By his 40s, he was making 90,000, contributing 18%, over 16,000 annually. His 50s, he peaked at 140,000, contributing 22%, nearly 31,000 annually. His lifestyle slowly improved from 48,000 to about 80,000 over that time period, but he captured all the income growth above that as savings. By his 50s, he was living comfortably on about 80,000 a year while earning 140,000. Banking the difference. He retired at 63 with 2.8 million, despite never having a spectacular salary. Just disciplined capture of every raise. Habit 2 is the subscription and recurring charge accumulation trap. You sign up for services one at a time. Each seems cheap and reasonable, and you never cancel anything. They just pile up silently in the background, month after month, year after year. When we went through this couple's bank and credit card statements, we found they were spending about $650 monthly on subscriptions and recurring charges. That was about 7% of their after-tax income just disappearing to recurring services, many providing little to no value. Some they used regularly and got value from, but many they'd forgotten about entirely. 3 streaming services, only regularly watched one, $70 a month. A gym membership from 4 years ago that auto-renewed annually, hadn't used it since switching to home workouts during the pandemic. $95 a month. Magazine subscriptions that went straight to recycling, never read, $40 a month. Premium versions of apps when free versions would have worked fine, $50 a month across various apps. Subscription boxes for hobbies they'd lost interest in, coffee they didn't drink, snacks they didn't need. $120 a month. Software renewals for programs they no longer used. Old antivirus subscriptions when their computers came with free protection, $80 a month. Cloud storage at 5 different places when they needed maybe one, $40 a month, and on and on. $650 a month is $7,800 annually. Over the last 20 years of their career at similar levels, that was about $156,000 spent on recurring charges. If they'd been more aggressive about canceling unused subscriptions and been more selective about signing up, they probably could have cut that to $200 a month for services they actually valued, saving about $450 monthly. That difference, $450 a month invested over 20 years at 8% returns, would have grown to about $260,000. $250,000 spent on subscriptions and recurring services, many of which provided little or no value to their lives. And the insidious part was they barely noticed. Each subscription was a small amount. The charges were automatic. They'd stopped looking at them individually years ago. The money just bled out steadily without conscious awareness. The fix requires discipline, but it's not complicated. Every 6 months, go through every recurring charge on your bank and credit card statements. List them all. For each one, ask, am I using this enough to justify the cost? Would I sign up for this today if I were starting fresh? Is there a cheaper alternative that would work just as well? Cancel everything that doesn't pass those tests. I watched someone implement this routine, and it changed their financial life. Twice a year, every January and July, they'd spend an hour reviewing subscriptions. They found they could eliminate about 40% of their recurring charges without missing anything. That saved them about $300 a month, $3,600 annually. Over 15 years of doing this consistently, redirecting that money to retirement accounts, it grew to over $110,000. 1 hour of work twice a year, 20 hours total over 15 years, created $110,000 of retirement wealth. That's $5,500 per hour for their time. Better return than any job. Habit 3 is the convenience premium default, automatically choosing the convenient option across dozens of daily decisions without considering the cumulative cost. This couple had fallen into patterns where convenience was the default choice for almost everything. They weren't lazy people. They worked hard at their jobs. But when it came to daily life decisions, they developed habits that consistently chose convenience over economy. Getting food delivered instead of picking it up or cooking, paying $28 for something that would have cost $12 to pick up or $7 to cook. They were doing this 3 or 4 times a week. That's about $70 a week. $3,600 annually, just on delivery fees and markups. Taking ride shares for short trips, they could have walked or taken public transit for $10 or $15 rides for trips that would have been free to walk, or $3 on the bus, maybe 3 times a week on average. $45 weekly, $2,300 annually. Buying individual snacks and drinks at convenience stores at 3 times the grocery store price, stopping for a coffee and snack instead of bringing them from home. $5 daily when it would have been $1 worth of stuff from home. $35 weekly, $1,800 annually. Paying for services they could have done themselves with minimal effort. Lawn care they could have done in an hour weekly. Car washes when they could have washed it themselves. Having their taxes done when their finances were simple enough to do themselves. Getting oil changes at the dealer instead of the quick change place, probably $2,500 annually across various services. Buying pre-prepared foods instead of cooking from basic ingredients. Pre-cut vegetables, pre-made meals, pre-marinated meats, all at significant premiums. Maybe an extra $100 a month on food, $1,200 annually. Add it all up, they were spending about $400 a month, $4,800 a year, on convenience premiums across all these categories. Over 25 years of their career where this pattern was established, that's $120,000 spent on convenience. If they'd invested that money instead at reasonable returns, that would have been worth about $320,000 at retirement. I'm not suggesting you should never pay for convenience. Time has value, and sometimes paying for convenience makes sense. If you're working long hours and food delivery means you don't have to cook after a 14-hour day, that might be worth it. But it should be a conscious choice based on actual circumstances, not an automatic default. The couple realized when we went through it that they weren't even getting much benefit from most of these convenience choices. They ordered delivery because it was easy, not because they were genuinely too exhausted to cook or pick up food. They took ride shares out of habit, not because walking 15 minutes was truly inconvenient. They bought overpriced convenience store items because they didn't plan ahead, not because they couldn't. Someone I knew made a game of reducing convenience spending. She'd challenge herself to specific goals each week. Cook at home 5 nights instead of getting takeout or delivery. Pack lunch 4 days instead of buying it. Walk or bike for any trip under 2 miles. Buy ingredients instead of prepared foods. Use the free car wash at the gas station instead of paying for premium washes. She calculated she was saving about $320 a month compared to her old convenience default habits. That's $3,800 annually. Over 15 years before retirement, maintaining these slightly less convenient but much cheaper habits, that single behavioral change was worth about $140,000 in her retirement account. All from just being a bit more intentional about daily choices. Habit 4 is the replacement as upgrade cycle. Every time something breaks or gets old, instead of replacing it with something similar, you upgrade to something better. This couple did this constantly across every category of their lives. It was so automatic they didn't even realize they were doing it. In their minds, they were just replacing things that wore out. But in reality, each replacement was an upgrade. Their car hit 100,000 miles and started needing repairs, maybe $1,000 in maintenance coming up. Instead of keeping it and doing the repairs or replacing it with a similar used car for $12,000, they bought a new car for $32,000. Their phone got slow after 3 years. Instead of replacing it with a comparable model for $400, they upgraded to the latest flagship for $1,200. Furniture started showing wear after 15 years. Instead of similar replacements that might have cost $3,000 for a living room set, they bought nicer pieces for $8,000. TV still worked after 10 years, but wasn't the newest technology, wasn't 4K or smart or whatever the current standard was. Instead of keeping it or replacing with a comparable TV for $500, they upgraded to a premium model for $1,800. Same pattern with appliances. Washer needed repairs. Instead of fixing it for $200 or replacing with a basic model for $600, they upgraded to high-end models for $1,400. Clothes wore out. Instead of replacing at similar quality and price point, they gradually moved to nicer brands and better quality at higher prices. Each upgrade felt earned, felt justified. We've been working hard. We deserve nice things. The old car was giving us problems. We need something reliable. Our phone was slow. We need something that works well. The furniture was shabby. We deserve a nice home. All understandable sentiments. But the pattern repeated across every category over 40 years was financially devastating. They bought 17 cars between them over their careers. If they just replaced cars with similar quality and driven them longer, maybe 8 or 9 cars total would have been sufficient. But each replacement was an upgrade. Started with economy sedans, moved to mid-size sedans, then to entry luxury, then to premium luxury vehicles. The excess cost of those unnecessary cars and premature upgrades was probably close to $400,000 over their careers when you account for the payments, insurance, and depreciation differences. Same pattern with everything else: furniture, appliances, electronics, even clothes, always trading up, always buying nicer than the last version. What they thought of as just replacing things was actually steadily inflating their standard of living and their cost of maintaining it. Over 40 years, across all categories, this upgrade habit probably consumed another $300,000 beyond what replacement in kind would have cost. The alternative is what I call replacement in kind. When your car needs replacing, you buy a similar car to what you had, not a nicer one. Similar age, similar features, similar price range, adjusted for inflation. When your couch wears out, you replace it with similar quality, not an upgrade. Same with phones, appliances, electronics, everything. Your baseline standard of living stays constant instead of perpetually inflating. I knew a man who followed this principle religiously. He drove the same class of car his entire career, practical mid-size sedans. Just replaced them when they hit 150,000 miles or became unreliable. Never upgraded to luxury brands. Never felt the need. Kept his furniture for decades. Replaced pieces only when they literally fell apart. Used electronics until they stopped working, then bought mid-range replacements that did what he needed. His friends thought he was cheap, living below his means despite a good income. But he retired at 60 with $1.3 million saved on an income that never exceeded $85,000. He'd avoided the upgrade trap entirely and redirected all that money to building wealth. Meanwhile, his friends with similar higher incomes retired with far less because they'd spent careers constantly upgrading everything. Habit 5 is the brand premium addiction, consistently paying extra for brands across every purchase category because of perception and habit, not because of actual value delivered. This couple bought brand names for everything. It wasn't even conscious most of the time, just automatic. Designer clothes instead of department store brands. A shirt was $80 instead of $30. Jeans were $150 instead of $40. Premium grocery brands instead of store brands that were often literally made in the same factories. Cereal was $5 instead of $2. Pasta was $4 instead of 99 cents. Luxury cars instead of reliable economy brands. A car payment was $800 a month instead of $400 a month for something that got them to the same places. Name brand electronics when mid-tier alternatives would have served them just as well. TV was $2,000 instead of $700 for the same screen size and features, just different brand. They bought Starbucks instead of making coffee at home or getting it from a regular coffee shop. $5 daily instead of 50 cents of home brewed. Premium wine instead of good value wine. $30 a bottle instead of $12 for something equally enjoyable. Name brand everything at the grocery store, pharmacy, department store. When we calculated it, they estimated they were spending about 25% more than necessary across all categories just because of brand preferences. On a spending level of $90,000 a year, which is roughly where they were for the last couple decades, that 25% premium was about $22,500 annually. Over 20 years, that's $450,000 spent on brand premiums. If they'd been more brand agnostic, tried store brands and mid-tier products and generic alternatives, and invested that difference, they'd have had over $1.1 million additional dollars at retirement. Over $1 million spent over their careers on labels and logos and brand perception, not on actual quality differences, because in many cases the quality was identical or nearly so. Blind taste tests of store brand versus name brand often show no preference. Consumer Reports consistently finds that mid-tier products often outperform premium brands. They were paying purely for the brand, for the feeling of buying premium, for the status signaling, for the habit of reaching for recognizable names. I'm not saying you should buy the cheapest version of everything. Quality matters. And sometimes premium products genuinely are better. But there's usually a point where you get 95% of the quality for 60 or 70% of the price. Paying that last 30 to 40% premium for the last 5% of quality difference is almost never worth it when you're trying to build wealth, especially when that premium compounds over decades. Someone I knew made a deliberate decision in her 30s to become brand agnostic. She'd try store brands first, mid-tier products, less prestigious options. Sometimes she found she genuinely preferred the brand names and stuck with them. Often, she found the alternatives were just as good or better. She bought her clothes at Costco instead of department stores. Same quality for half the price. Store brand groceries, no taste difference. Toyota instead of Lexus, same reliability for 30% less. Over her career, she estimated she spent about 18% less on everything compared to brand loyal peers with similar incomes and lifestyles. That 18% difference on an average spending level of $75,000, saved and invested over 35 years, was worth over $600,000 at retirement. Same quality of life, $600,000 more wealth, just from not overpaying for brands. Here's what connects all 5 habits. They don't feel like mistakes when you're doing them. They feel like normal life, like reasonable choices, like what everyone around you does. The automatic lifestyle expansion feels like enjoying your success as you earn more. The subscription accumulation happens gradually and invisibly. The convenience default seems like a reasonable trade of money for time. The upgrade cycle feels like maintaining your standard of living. The brand premium feels like getting quality. But repeated thousands of times over 40 years, these 5 habits consumed literally millions of dollars that could have been saved and invested. When we finished the analysis, this couple sat there quietly for a while. They'd earned $3.5 million over their combined careers and had $230,000 saved. We'd essentially accounted for where most of the missing $3.3 million went. Not to anything dramatic or catastrophic, just to these 5 everyday habits repeated endlessly. If they'd avoided these habits, if they'd captured their raises as savings instead of lifestyle expansion, if they'd managed subscriptions aggressively, if they'd avoided convenience and upgrade and brand premiums, they'd have accumulated probably $2.3 million or more for retirement instead of $230,000. Same careers, same income, radically different outcome based purely on spending habits. The wife said something that stuck with me. She said they'd felt like they were being responsible their whole lives. They paid their bills on time. They didn't carry credit card debt. They never overdrew their accounts. They owned their home. By conventional standards of financial responsibility, they'd been fine. But by the standards of what their income should have enabled, they'd squandered their financial potential on habits that seemed normal at the time, but were actually wealth-destroying. I see this pattern everywhere. People earning $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 a year or more, following these same 5 habits, feeling like they're doing okay because they're keeping up with bills, not realizing they're on track for a retirement of scarcity instead of security, because these seemingly innocent behaviors are robbing them of their future. The tragedy is that it's fixable if you catch it early enough. These aren't hard habits to break once you recognize them. You can bank your raises instead of spending them. You can audit subscriptions twice a year and cancel aggressively. You can default to doing things yourself instead of always choosing convenience. You can replace things in kind instead of constantly upgrading. You can try generic alternatives instead of automatically buying premium brands. None of these changes require dramatic sacrifice or living like a monk. You're not deprived. You're just being more intentional about spending, choosing the habits that build wealth instead of the habits that destroy it. This couple made changes immediately. Even though they were in their early 60s and close to retirement, they couldn't recover the lost decades, but they could stop the bleeding. They cut their subscriptions from $650 a month to $180, keeping only what they truly valued. They started cooking at home most nights and eliminated most delivery spending. They committed to driving their current cars until they literally died, no upgrades. They switched to store brands for most groceries and stopped buying premium everything. Their spending dropped from around $95,000 annually to about $72,000 without feeling deprived. In fact, they said they didn't really miss most of what they'd cut. The unused subscriptions were invisible. The convenience spending had been mindless habit. The upgrade cycle had been keeping up with expectations they didn't care about anymore. The brand spending had been automatic, not meaningful. They told me that if they'd lived this way during their careers, saving that $23,000 annual difference, they'd have had well over $2 million at retirement instead of $230,000. That realization was painful, but also clarifying. They could see exactly what those 5 habits had cost them. That's the cost of habits. They're invisible while you're following them. They feel like normal life, like reasonable choices. By the time you realize they were destroying your financial future, you've lost decades you can't get back. The time to break these habits is now, not later when the damage is irreversible and you're looking at retirement without adequate savings, wondering where all the money went. So examine your own habits honestly. Are you spending every raise instead of saving at least half of it? Are you accumulating subscriptions without regularly auditing and canceling them? Are you defaulting to convenience without considering whether the premium is worth it? Are you upgrading everything instead of replacing in kind? Are you paying brand premiums that don't deliver proportional value? If you see yourself in these 5 habits, you're probably robbing your own retirement, just like this couple did. The habits feel fine now, normal, reasonable, like what everyone does. They won't feel fine in 20 years when you're facing retirement without enough saved and finally understanding what all those small daily choices actually cost you over a lifetime.